So welcome everyone. I'm glad that you're able to make it out to our second session of the financial education series with Dr. Stacy Bartlett. Tonight we'll be talking about retirement savings, and feel free to put any questions in the chat as things go along. And I just want to put out as a disclaimer, this is for educational purposes only. We are not providing financial advising here, but just sharing our knowledge. So I'll let Dr. Bartlett take it away.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Ryan, for having me. I, as you know, love talking about this stuff and getting to share. So thank you so much for having me, and excited to see you all too. So I'm going to go ahead and share so we can get started. But I do want to, for those who came in later, if you don't mind either coming off of mute or putting in the chat, just what year you are, where you're coming from, question you might have, what brought you here, etc. That would be great. This is super casual.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I am a first year resident at Duke Southern Regional Area Healthcare Education Center. It's a very long name, but it's in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and family medicine residency. And I recently they had a presentation on like 401k plans and how much you would need to take out and how much they can return and match. And I was a little bit confused, and also could not afford to take anything more out of my paycheck at this time. And I was like, am I making a mistake not getting it? Should I get it? Should I rethink it? So I hope that this will give me some insight into that.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that they talked to you about it. That's a first step. It doesn't always happen. So good, Justin. But yeah, definitely we can talk through that for sure. And if we don't answer questions, definitely let me know. Please feel free to ask questions throughout, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. And then you can just shout out, because I may not be able to see the little hands and stuff. So please just shout out if you have questions. All right. So yes, my name is Stacy Bartlett. I am an assistant professor of family medicine at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine and the Shadyside Family Medicine Residency. I'm also a certified financial education instructor and love talking about this stuff. So hoping after, I don't know what happened there, but hoping after this, you're able to compare options for retirement investing options, identify some key terms that are related to investment products. So those are things like stocks, bonds, index funds, etc., and then determine whether you're ready to start investing outside of retirement. Couple disclaimers. I'm not an expert, do have some training, do spend a lot of time talking and thinking about this stuff, but I'm technically not a certified financial planner. As Ryan said, this is for educational purposes only. Encourage you to consult an attorney or tax advisor if you have specific questions. This is also not comprehensive. There's tons more we could talk about, even with regard to investing, than we'll get to in this hour. But if you have questions, certainly we can talk more. And then we'll talk about a couple of products that have pretty good reputation, things that I use, but I'm technically not endorsing any of those products. So goal here is for you throughout for this and for our whole series is for you to understand basic personal finance topics to decrease your stress, prepare you for the next steps in your career, and hopefully become a little less broke. Fun offered for us. Okay. So we're going to talk today about retirement. We've got future sessions talking about making budgets in residency and how to make more money in residency, how to get you the bridge from residency to attending life, all of that. But we'll talk about retirement things today. So one of the questions I get a lot is people tell me I should be saving for retirement. I don't know. The answer is yes. If it's at all possible, saving for retirement is a good thing. So we're going to go through all of these. So we're going to go through who should be saving for retirement. Really, it should be everyone. Why? Because you can't work forever. I know we're all just sort of starting our careers, but you can't work forever. You're not going to work forever. When should you start? Now, because of compound interest, which we'll talk about. What does retirement investing look like? Talk about the vehicles and products and what actually we are, when you say you're investing for retirement, what does it actually mean? how do you do it? We're going to do a step-by-step guide. So I'm actually going to show you how I do my investments and show you kind of what your options will look like for you, almost certainly in whatever stage you're in now or in the future. And then how much you should be saving depends, and we'll talk about how to come up with that number for you as well. Okay, so 2 reasons why saving now, investing now makes sense for those of you who are residents, or if you are med students, you'll soon be a resident, and we'll hopefully have a match. Not every program does, but most of them have some form of retirement account, and a lot of them have a match. That match is free money. You need to make sure you're getting that match at least. Otherwise, you're not getting your full compensation for all the work you're doing. So at least doing enough to get that match is like crucial. The other reason why it's great to start now is because of compound interest, which we'll talk about now. So compound interest is something that people have heard of before, related to retirement or not. Okay, perfect. The idea is that the sooner you start saving or investing, the better you are, the less you actually have to end up putting in of your own money over time. So this is just a quick chart from our good friends at JP Morgan that sort of shows us what the power of that compound interest. So you've got this person in the blue who's starting to invest at 25 and investing till 65, earning about 6.5%, getting to about $2 million at the end, which sounds like a lot of money, but you will need at least that for your retirement, I promise. This person in the gray saved from 25 to 35, so just started at 25 and did a 35, just 10 years, and got to about $1 million. The one in the purple didn't start till 35 and had to save for 30 years to get to the same amount of money. Actually, it's a little bit less than the person who saved just for 10 years, but started earlier. The last one that I like to point out here is the green one. And this is someone who's just saving cash. So when people say they're saving for retirement, sometimes they use that interchangeably with investing for retirement. You can't save your way to retirement. It's just not gonna work. You can't save enough money to be able to fund your retirement. So, and you don't want to be broke in retirement. Like, you really don't want to be broke now, but you definitely don't want to be broke at 65. Or you might have seen some people in the hospital who are like walking around at 80 because they can't retire because they haven't saved enough. So you also don't want to be that person. So you want to try to make sure you're saving enough so that you can retire whenever you want to, can go part-time, can switch jobs, can just leave for good, whatever it is you want to do. But you can't just save. You'll have to invest your money. You can't just put it in a savings account. That all makes sense? Questions about that? I'm gonna ask you guys for lots of thumbs up. Okay, great. It's hard when you're talking into the like abyss of not knowing what's landing, what's not. Okay. So I work at UPMC. It's where I went to residency and where I work as well. So I'd use this as kind of the sample for you all. And I'd love to hear what you guys know about your plans for your residencies, or for our med students, if you've seen any in sort of recruitment or anything. So at UPMC, we have 403Bs. Does anybody know what a 403B is compared to a 401k? No, okay, totally fair. People have heard of a 401k? Oh, it sounds like yes, we do. Jasmine, what's the difference between a 403B and a 401k?
Oh, I don't know. I just heard it before.
Okay, totally fine. So you've heard of 401k. I asked 2 questions. That's, not supposed to do that in medical interviewing, right? I asked 2 questions and didn't give you a chance to answer. So 401k, which is what most people have heard of, is the same as a 403B. It's just that a 403B is what it's called when you work for a nonprofit. It's just what the tax code numbers are. So we all most likely will spend most of our time in a 403B because that's what your residency program is most likely going to have. And even as an attending, a lot of hospitals, offices, the VA, the like FQHCs are going to have 403Bs because they're going to be technically nonprofits. Even giant conglomerates like UPMC are nonprofits. So, which is the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, I should say. So anyway, so the 403B for UPMC has a match, which is great. That match is free money, as we said. It is part of your salary. I really would love for you to be able to get it if you can. At UPMC, it is a 50% match up to 4% of your salary. And it's vested at 3 years. Anybody have any idea what vesting means? Or heard of vested? No. Okay. So vested means that you are able to take the money that they are giving you, in addition to what you're putting in, you're able to actually keep that money. Until you give them enough time, enough of your time, enough years working for them, you don't actually get to keep that money that they're giving you as part of the match. So the way the match works is, we'll look at this example over here. So if you have about $5,000 a month, like a typical resident salary, and you want to give 4%, which is what you need to do to get the match. That's $200, excuse me. That's your contribution. They're going to do a 50% match up to that 4%. So that's 2%. 2% of that $5,000 of your salary is $100. So the total contribution to your retirement would be $300 a month. You're putting in $200 and your employer's putting in $100. That $100 for that one, thank you. I so appreciate it, Jasmine. That $100 that UPMC is putting in, or your employer, whoever's putting in, you don't get to keep that. And that's going to, grow over the 3 years of residency. You don't get to keep that unless you stay for 3 years. So when you're looking at your plans, you want to see how long that period is. Some places will make it like 3.5 years or 4 years, so they don't have to give you the money if you are a resident, which is not super kind, but some of them have it set up that way. So it's something you want to know when your vesting period is. And then when you get your first job, you also for sure want to find out when that vesting period is. So anybody know what their match is, if they have one at their program, and or what it is?
Yes. Okay. They told us, I believe it's the same 50% match, but up to 6% of salary. I think it was also vested at 3 years.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Is it Edith? Is that right? Is that right? Okay. I think that's who it was. Okay. So, thank you for sharing. So yeah, so that 6% means that you could contribute even more than what like our residents are able to contribute. So you could do that 6% and then get 3% from your residency, from your program as well. So that's even better. The higher both of those numbers are, the better. So, oh, I'm sorry, Jasmine. I think I thought that they were off mute and I didn't see you. It's hard to see on the bottom. I apologize. So, yeah, some of them will do 100% match up to a certain percentage. Some of them will do 75% match up to, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%. So those are, the higher that is, the better. And ideally you can do as much as you can to get up to that match so that you can get that free money. Cool. Okay. And Vaughn, it sounds like you don't think you have anything at all. Sorry. Which is not uncommon. I think most places do, but not all of them. And we'll talk about ways that you can do investing for retirement, investing for whatever you want to outside of what your employer is giving you to, if you'd like. Okay, so how much should you?
I'll just add there that maybe it might be worthwhile to talk with HR, Vaughn, because I know at my residency they didn't do a match your first year, but then it would start the second year.
That's a great point. Yeah, finding out what the details are just to make sure you don't have one, and seeing if maybe it's not available to you as an intern, but maybe as a second year or third year. It's a great point. And it shouldn't be like it's a pretty cut and dry thing, so it should be something they have readily available to be able to show you. All right, so if it's vested past 3 years, Yeah, that's a great question, right? So if you have you're in a 3-year residency, we're all, I think mostly family medicine here. So you're in a 3-year residency and they say it's vested at 4 years. You won't get any of that match money. You're still going to get the benefits of being invested in a retirement account, but that match benefit is not there. So it would make sense to at least compare that to your other options, like an IRA. And a Roth IRA is my favorite things for residents, and we'll talk about that in a second. And that may be a better bet for you. It's a great question. It then means, I think, Leanne, I would say, it means it's not automatically the best first choice. It might still be the right choice for you, but it's definitely not automatically the best choice. That makes sense. We'll talk about what that other choice might be. Okay. So how much you should, I should talk about that. How much you should save depends on how old you are, when you want to retire, and what kind of retirement you want to have. It's very difficult to envision what kind of retirement you might want to have because you are very far away from that. So that one's a little bit more difficult to visualize. And it also might be hard to even think beyond, I don't have any money to contribute to retirement right now. So this question is a little bit moot, which might be true for you, but something that I want you to start thinking about before you even have all the money to be able to make that decision. The idea of like doing this now is that you're not, blasted with all of this money once you become an attending and have no idea what to do with it, right? So getting those principles now is what we're really trying to instill. So there's 2 kind of approaches to figuring out how much money you should or can be saving for retirement. If you're a resident, the match is your goal. You're probably not, oftentimes you're not able to do more than that. Now, perhaps you have money from another job before, you have a partner that's making a decent amount of money, et cetera. But for a lot of residents, getting the match is as much as they could do. If you're in a situation where you are able to do more, or we're thinking sort of, okay, a year from now, what I like to be doing, or 2 years from now, 2 ways you can think about how much you should be putting away. One, the sort of old school way is to do this calculation based on the fact that you will likely need 25 times what you want your income to be in retirement as your sort of nest egg. Again, hard to imagine what you're going to need or want necessarily in retirement. But there have been a bunch of smart people over a bunch of years who have figured out that if you make these assumptions, that one of your assumptions is a 4% withdrawal rate, which means that of that $2 million you have when you retire at 60 or 65 or whatever, you take 4% of that out every year. That your returns from the stock market are going to be between 6 and 10%, that stock market's going to do well enough that you'll get a 6 to 10% return every year, and that you're going to retire at 65. Lots of calculations went into using those assumptions to come up with the fact that you need 25 times your retirement income. So if you can envision that, 100% go for it. I find it easier to use this sort of general guidance, which is saving at least 10 to 15% of your income. It's a little bit risky, especially for physicians who are making more money. We actually end up needing to save a higher percentage of our salary to kind of maintain lifestyle in retirement. But if you're thinking are going to have other sources of money, you're going to have a low cost of retirement, that's fine. The safest thing to do is to save 20%, which sounds like a lot of money. Like saving 20% of your paycheck sounds like a whole lot, and I totally appreciate that. Especially perhaps now. If you're thinking about retiring early, like 50, you probably need to save a lot more. Probably need to save more like 30%. If you want to retire even earlier, you need to save more. So aiming for that 20% is a good benchmark for now. Okay. So now we're going to get kind of into the nitty-gritty of what we're talking about when we talk about retirement investing. So there's really 3 decisions that you have to make when you're talking about investing for retirement. I should pause. Any questions about figuring out how much you need to save, about match, about other things? No. Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. So there are 3 decisions that you need to make. there are a bunch of analogies also that I've come across in the financial space to describe what these decisions you have to make. We'll see if any of them resonate with you. But the first decision you have to make is what type of accounts you're going to be looking at. So that's a 401k, a 403b, an IRA, an HSA, things like that. We've talked about what a 401k versus a 403b is already. For those of us who just joined us, 403b is the version if you work for a nonprofit, 401k is the version if you do not. They're exactly the same. An IRA we'll talk about in a second, HSA we'll talk about a little bit later. So you're going to choose, am I doing a 401k, 403b, an IRA? Then you're going to choose which type of those things. All of those things come in two flavors, Roth and traditional. Has anybody heard of Roth or traditional as types of 401ks before? Yes. Okay, cool. Great. So you're going to choose which type you want, either Roth or traditional, for each of those things. And then once you do that, you have to decide which investments you actually want to put in that account. So do you want to do one single, loan kind of stock? Do you want to do a mutual fund? Do you want to do a target date fund, et cetera? So what exactly are you investing in? And we'll talk about what those investment types are too. So this analogy is that you pick the sort of type of vehicle you want. So SUV, hatchback, whatever, that's your 401k, 403b. Then you pick a flavor, like electric car versus a gas car. Then you pick the passengers, who's going to go in the car. And that's the stocks that you're putting in the 401k or the 403b or the IRA. The Roth 401k or the traditional 403b or et cetera. So we'll talk about what Roth is. Got a question about advantages of Roth things. So we'll talk about that. This is another way to think about it. Some people, there's this sort of packing analogy, picking a type of suitcase, what color do you want, and then what are you going to put in it? Okay, so when we're talking about how to get to 20%, if that's our number that we're going to shoot for, we're going to aim for, there are a couple ways to do that. One is through tax advantaged investments. So that's the 401k, 403b, 457, which we haven't yet talked about, IRA. Non-tax advantaged investments would be brokerage accounts. So the idea is that the government is saying, we want you to save for retirement. We want to make it beneficial for you to save for retirement. How we're going to do that is by giving you a tax break if you save for retirement. So if you save for retirement in one of these vehicles, the 401k, 403b, 457, they'll give you a tax break. If you're investing outside of that in a regular brokerage account, so that's something you get at like Fidelity or at Vanguard or just any kind of brokerage account that's not your kind of work-related 401k, 403b, or your independent retirement account, you're not going to get any tax advantages. The benefit to the question that we got here is that the non-tax advantaged investments, they're kind of separate from the government completely. You can do whatever you want with them, essentially. I mean, legally, right? You can take it out when you want. You can invest in whatever you want. There's tons of options. You can withdraw it without any penalties. For the tax advantaged ones, the government is saying, in exchange for us giving you a tax break on this, we're going to make some restrictions on it. We're going to make it such that you can't take it out whenever you want to, because we're trying to make you save for retirement. You can only put a certain amount of money in there. So you can't put like $1 million a year and not pay taxes on it. So they put some restrictions on it, kind of in exchange for you getting that tax break. We talked about savings. You can't save enough for retirement. Savings are a great thing for different topics, but saving for retirement is not going to happen. Not a thing. Okay, so we'll start with the tax advantaged ones. Two kinds of those too. So there's the ones that are employer sponsored. So they come from your employer. That's the 401k, the 403b, and a 457. 457 is one that you probably never have heard of, but if you go into academics, which Ryan and I highly encourage you to consider, but if you go into academics, you may have a 457, which is an option for retirement account. There's usually no match for it. So it's not kind of the first line that you would choose. And there's this very strange quirk in the in the tax code that makes it such that if your employer or the government, that's the only people who can have these academic institutions or the government, goes under, like goes bankrupt essentially, then they can take your money from your retirement account. So do not, I would say not to invest in them unless you feel like your institution, your university that you're working for is very stable, or you feel like the government is stable, because those two things, if those things go under, could be at risk. Like I mentioned before, the government will put a max every year on how much you can actually put into these accounts because they're giving you a tax break. That max for 2023 is $22,500, which again sounds like a whole bunch right now of your resident salary, but when you're making $250, it's not actually a huge percentage of your salary. Okay, so non-employer sponsored, but still tax advantaged is the IRA, and that's an individual retirement account. So a couple things places you might think about using an IRA. One is if there's no 401k or 403b available through your employer, you need more space, you need more to get to your 20%, like that 22,000 that you can put into the 401k is not enough to get to your 20%, which again, not now, soon, you'll need more space. Or if you want more flexibility, because the IRA you take with you, it's not connected to your employer at all, and has some different advantages, specifically a Roth IRA. So, like we said, we've got those vehicle options, those 401k, 403b, 457. We have these two types, the Roth and traditional. Sounds like some people have heard of those two things. Maybe oftentimes people have heard of them, don't really know the difference, not quite sure which one is better. So we'll go through what those two things are. Roth means nothing as a name, just so you know, it's just the last name of the senator who introduced this to the world. So the Roth type, if you choose to do a 403b, a Roth 403b, for instance, you're contributing after tax money, which means that you are getting your paycheck, whatever your $65,000 or whatever you're getting paid, and government's going to tax that money at probably a 20-something% tax rate, and then whatever number you say that you want to contribute, say it's $100 a month, is going to come out of that post-tax, after-tax money that you're contributing. Because they're taxing you in the front end, you do not get taxed when you take it out. So you're getting taxed at your lower tax bracket right now when you're making $60K, as opposed to the tax bracket that you'll be when you retire, which will be who knows how many, but much more than $60K. And as you know, the United States, we have a progressive tax system, so you get taxed at a higher rate the more you make. So it's usually better to do a Roth in residency. Certainly if you're a med student and not making a ton of money, almost always makes sense to do in residency as well. When you switch to being attending, it often makes sense to switch to traditional, not for everybody, but oftentimes people will switch to traditional because you're being taxed that pre-tax money. So you have a $250,000 salary or something, they're taking money off the top before it's even taxed, which is helpful to reduce your adjusted gross income, which is helpful for your taxes. So when you make a lot more money, it's usually better to do the traditional version. Can also be helpful if you're doing student loans and you're doing an income-based repayment, because that money that they'll take off from your retirement, so say you're taking that $100 a month, the government's going to look at that number after you took that $100 out and say, that's what you made. That's what we're going to base your income-based payment requirement for your student loans on. So can be helpful to do that traditional version for that reason too. That's a little bit tricky. So if that was confusing, let me know. We can talk through that. But yeah, sometimes can be helpful to do the traditional when you're thinking about student loan repayment further down the road. Okay. So we'll talk about Roth IRAs, and then we'll take a little quick, I'll take a pause so we can make sure we have no questions. Make sure we not no questions. Love to have questions. See if there are questions. So the Roth IRA is something that I want to make sure you at least think about doing. I love the Roth IRA for residents while you're in residency. This is like we said, you're picking an IRA. So instead of a 401k or a 403b that's tied to your employer, we're doing an IRA, which is an individual retirement account.
Let's go TikTok. Today we're gonna get,
and we're choosing to do the Roth version of that. So there are 3 things that I
Just give me, I think it's like a 12.
Okay, cool. So we'll talk about the Roth IRA and why I think it's great. So 3 things that I think make it wonderful. One is that it's flexible. So you can withdraw what you've contributed to a Roth IRA at any time. So if you put in $100 a month, at the end of a year, you'd have $1,200. You can take all of that out. But you're going to be investing it, right? So it's going to grow, hopefully. That growth that occurs is not something you can take out for anything, like for just whatever you want. But you can always take out what you've contributed. You can also withdraw what you've contributed plus what's grown for certain things. So for your first house, for having a baby, things that might come up, when you are 30, you can withdraw all of what you have if it's for those specific expenses, which is not true for most of these 401k, 403bs. So back to that question earlier about like, if we're not able to get the vesting, does it make sense to think about other things? And it might, because something like an IRA is going to be much more flexible. So as long as the IRA has some good options for you to invest in, it could be a better option than doing the one through your employer if you're not getting a match. There are some limits. You can only contribute $6,500 a year. Again, government's giving you some tax breaks. They're gonna kind of keep it tight in terms of how much you can contribute. And there is an income limit. So you can only make $138,000 a year. So probably not a problem in residency, would be a problem once you're in attending. And then once you're in attending, you can think about doing what's called a backdoor Roth, which is beyond the scope of this talk, but something to talk about at some point if you'd like to. But there's another restriction in terms of the income. So if you decide you want to think about doing a Roth IRA, especially for someone like Vaughn who doesn't have something offered by their residency program, or they're not getting a match, or they just want a little more flexibility, the IRA is a great option. 2 ways you could do it. You could go through something like Fidelity or E-Trade, in which you'd pick your own investment. So you would just say, I'm going to invest in Apple and Costco or something, or a mutual fund or whatever, which we'll talk about. Or if you want some help picking what you'd want to invest in, SoFi and Wealthfront are 2 that will help you choose which investments make sense for a small fee, obviously, but they will help you pick those things. Questions about that?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say you can withdraw, I guess this is for Roth. So is it just is it a fund that you can withdraw from? Because I feel like the 401ks and 403bs are kind of like this mythical thing that's put away for later. But I guess I'm confused about the Roth in terms of withdrawal. How does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're totally right. So 401k, 403b are essentially mythical things that you just contribute into for most of your working life. And then when you retire, you take them out. It's almost never a good idea to take money out of them before you retire, because there's severe penalties for that. You will lose a lot of your money if you withdraw it before, again, because the government's trying to make you sort of wait and keep investing until retirement. The Roth IRA is just a little special little tool in which you can take out more from it. So some people will actually use it as an emergency fund, where they'll say, I'm just going to put my money in here. It's a little bit risky because you are investing it all, right? So stock market could go down, you could lose some of it. but there's just so much more flexibility because you can take money out of it when you want to. So literally just be going on the internet to wherever you have your IRA, like say you have it at Fidelity, and taking out $500. Now, if you're going to take out the contribution plus the investment growth, and you're going to say you're going to use it for a qualified expense, there's a little more paperwork for that because you have to prove to them that you used it for a qualified expense. But otherwise, it's pretty simple to take money out from there. So yeah, you're right. They do operate pretty differently.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there questions about IRA, 401k? Okay, we'll keep moving. Okay, so if you're thinking about doing a 20%, this is obviously not common for residency, but the first thing you probably would do would be the 401k, 403b up to the match if you have one. And then think about doing a Roth IRA, because that max IRA is $6,500, but you want to do the Roth in residency for the most part. And then you could think about, if you have more money that you want to put away, you could think about going back to that 401k, 403b up to that maximum that they'll allow you to do, the 22.5. And then if you still need more space, still want to save more, invest more, you could think about using a brokerage account, or investing in real estate, etc. So our example here is if you're making $65,000 a year and you say, I'm going to do 20%, that'd be $13,000. You're going to get at UPMC, you'd get 6% because you'll do the 4% from what you're contributing and the 2% match. That would get you to $3,900. And then if you put $6,500 in the Roth IRA, you still need to get that $2,600 to get to $20,000 somewhere, and that would go in the 403b. Similarly, for an attending, you'd want to do that 401k, 403b up to the match. A lot of people will then do what's called a backdoor Roth that I kind of alluded to earlier, up to $6,500, then go back and do that 401k, 403b up to the max. And then you probably still have some space. You'll need to put something in a taxable account. So a brokerage account, or again, real estate, something like that. Okay, so summary slide. All the decisions that you had to make when you decide you're going to save, when you decide you're going to invest for retirement, I should say. So you first decide if you're going to do, yes, certainly, tax benefit versus no tax benefit. If you decide you're going to do a tax benefit, which one of these things are you going to choose? Then you have to pick whether it's Roth or traditional, and then you have to choose your investments. So we're going to talk about that investment things, but first I had a question about backdoor Roth. So the backdoor Roth is a mechanism to, it's a legal mechanism, it's a legal loophole. There's 100% a loophole, but it is legal, where if you make more than the income limit, which for this year is $138,000, for all these limits, I will say, go up every year or every 2 years based on inflation. But this year it's 138,000. And there's different levels if you're married. So if you make over that amount of money, what essentially you do is you contribute all of the money into a regular IRA, a non-Roth IRA, and then you sort of roll it over in a short amount of time between the end of the year and when your taxes are due into a traditional IRA. I'm sorry, into a Roth IRA, sorry. And then you get the benefits of the Roth. Again, not probably relevant until you are making significant amounts of money. And also, not everyone's going to do the Roth IRA as their first choice. They may fill up a 401k and fill up a regular IRA, or fill up a, if they have, like I have, because of academics, I have 2 403bs and a 457. So I have a lot of space other places. I do backdoor Roth, but not everyone's going to choose to go through that. Can also help if you have an accountant to do it for you, to make sure you're, especially the first time. That's what I did the first time, just to make sure that I was not going to run afoul of the IRS, because nobody wants that. Well, let me know if you have other questions, if that answered your question. And I'm happy to talk more offline about the mechanics if you're considering doing one. Okay. So I know we're getting short on time here. So I know one of the things that residents ask me a lot is like, okay, so if I do this 403B in residency, like what happens when I leave? So there are 3 options that you can do with your 403B when you leave. One of them is that you keep it. You can no longer contribute to it when you leave, and you can't change the investments that you've chosen, but it will continue to grow. And sometimes they have lower fees than what you could get at your next employer. Sometimes it's a good idea to keep it. You could also roll it over. So your new employer hopefully has a 403B or 401k, and you could, we call a rollover 403B, and you just put it in the new one. You work, so your new employer's HR people will tell you how to get your old one to transfer into their new one. You can also roll it over into an IRA to that individual retirement account. And sometimes you have more options in those, and so it makes sense to do that. The only thing I would say is really do not do, unless you absolutely have to, but really, really try to avoid it, is to cash it out. Again, government doesn't want you to do that. They're going to penalize you. They're going to take at least 10% of your money for you to cash it out. So if you can avoid that as an option, that's ideal. Okay.
Yeah, other things I would add just for people that may be closer to graduating or are thinking about staying like per diem in between the time that you like off residency and gonna start a new job, is that you being per diem is still considered you being employed. Because that happened to me where I was like, oh, I'm no longer getting an employee benefit because I'm a per diem. And I was trying to roll it over, and they're like, no, you're considered still employed. So just something to be aware of.
A great point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so the last thing, man, I have like 10 minutes. I think we can do this. The last thing I want to talk about is what exactly you're investing in. This won't take a ton of time, I promise. So you've chosen your 401k, you've chosen that you want it to be 401k or 403b or IRA, you've chosen that you want it to be Roth or traditional. Now you have to decide what you're actually going to invest in. So one of the things you can invest in are stocks. Stocks are shares of a company. So you're buying some tiny percentage of Target. They have about a moderate risk and a moderate reward. So stock market can go up a decent amount, can also go down a decent amount. You're not gonna make 50% return in the stock market, but you're probably also not going to lose 50% of your money in the stock market. Usually, bonds are another thing you can invest in. So bonds are a loan to the government or to a company. So like the city says we need to build a bridge, and they say we're going to put out these bonds to people. We'll guarantee that we'll give them a 2% return on their money after a year or 2 years. Super safe, because usually it's some really stable company or the government, which is probably not going to it's probably going to pay their bills, but also you're not going to get a ton of money out of that. So you'll be guaranteed really to get your 2%, but you're not going to make 20% on it, but you're not going to lose 20% for sure. Then there are other things you can invest in. So higher risk things like crypto and real estate and your friend's restaurant or whatever. Other things that are higher risk could make a ton of money, but also much higher, higher reward, could make a ton of money, but also higher risk. So most things that you're going to invest in are stocks or bonds. Stocks, when you think about stocks, there are several options within what a stock would be. There are individual stocks where you own a share of a specific company, like Apple or Pepsi. There are mutual funds, which you might have heard of, which are multiple stocks. So it's a group of stocks, because you put all your money in an individual stock. If you put your money in Blockbuster, not gonna be good for you. That's, your stock portfolio is gonna plummet. If you use a mutual fund, it gets a whole group of stocks, 10, 50, 100 stocks into one big group, and you're investing in all of those. Which means that if you invested in Blockbuster, but you also invested in Tesla, then you're going to be in a better, they're going to kind of even each other out. They are often actively managed, which means that someone's getting paid to manage, to decide what's going in that bucket, which means they have to get paid, which means you have to pay some percentage of what you're going to make to pay for that person who's making those decisions. They're often grouped into kind of what they like topic. So international mutual fund, a socially responsible mutual fund that like wouldn't have investments in tobacco companies or coal or things like that. ETFs are quite similar to mutual funds, but they trade like a stock. Oftentimes you'll see these mutual funds that are called something called large cap or mid cap or small cap. And that just means how big the company is. So large cap would be big, Walmart, etc. Small cap would be ones we never heard of. Mid cap would be things that are kind of like regional or things that are startup type businesses. Index funds are a wonderful thing. So index funds are, instead of investing in just one thing like the individual stock or even just a group of 10 stocks, you're investing in the entire stock market. So there are 3 indices. There's the S&P, the Dow, and the NASDAQ. You can invest in the entire stock market in any of those. So in this way, you're just your investments, your kind of what you're making kind of goes along with the entire stock market. If it's up, you're up. If it's down, you're down. They're not actively managed because there's nothing to choose, right? You're investing in the entire stock market, all 500 of the S&P companies. So the fees are tend to be really low for that, which is helpful. The last one I want to make sure we talk about is target date funds. So target date funds are great. I love them. So the idea with investing is that you're going to start out with a much more aggressive portfolio when you're young. And by aggressive, we mean lots of stocks, lots of riskier stocks, things that could make more money in the long run, because you have the time to kind of ride out any waves, fluctuations of the stock market. As you get closer to retirement, you want to switch that to more bonds. Bonds are much safer, as we talked about, because you don't want to be 60, about to retire, and then it's like 2008 and the stock market crashes and you have no money left. If you were invested in bonds, your money would be pretty much stable for the last couple of years before you retire. So one option is to, we call rebalance your portfolio every year, at least every year. Some people do it more often than that. As you get older, to become less conservative, become less risky and more conservative. Target date funds do that for you. So you just tell them what year you think you want to retire, and it will just adjust for you as you go. So you could literally start it at 25, tell it when you want to retire, and then you never have to look at it. I mean, you should look at it just to see what's happening, but you never have to change it or rebalance it or think about adjusting things again, which is beautiful. Index funds are better than actively managed funds. Turns out, actually, people don't know how to pick up stocks. They're no better than just choosing the entire stock market. So, and they cost more money. So almost always, as Ryan said, like index funds are the way to go. Do not pay somebody to pick your funds. Okay. Probably not going to get to this sort of investing for other things, but principles are similar. We can talk about this at a different time. But I did want to show you guys really quickly what it looks like in practice if you've not ever looked at changing at what your investment options might be. But while I'm getting this, please feel free to shout out questions or put them in the chat. Everybody's got it? Great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes. When it comes to target date funds, okay, I'm a little confused on how this relates to like or does it relate to the 403b, 401k, Roth IRA, or is it a separate investment thing?
Yeah, great question. So this is a concept that's like super difficult to, I think, get for everybody, for most people. But so your 401k, 403b is just this kind of like vehicle. It doesn't actually, there's no investments in it until you put an investment in it, until you put something in it, until you put stocks in it. It's just like an empty vessel. So you have to decide 401k or 403b or IRA or whatever. So when you're deciding what you want to put into it, that's what we're talking about with the target date fund or the mutual fund or the index fund.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like those three decisions you have to make. First, you decide, am I doing a 401k or 403b? Then you have to decide, am I doing it Roth or traditional? And then you have to decide, okay, what am I going to put in it? What am I actually going to invest into that thing? It's hard.
I think one other thing just to know is like when you do contribute to your whatever retirement account, it automatically goes into what's called a money market, which is like really a just savings account basically. So your money just sits there and it doesn't do anything until you assign it to do something.
Yeah. So this is that. Yeah, exactly. This is the page that I'm on for mine. So from one of my paychecks through Pitt, we're in a TIAA, which you might be TIAA or some other kind of firm. That part doesn't really matter that much, but these are the options that I have to invest in. So I've chosen, I think this is my 403b. Yeah, so this is my 403b right now. I'm in a target date fund. I love target date funds, but if I wanted to change it, these are my options. So you'd have to decide how much, like what percentage, which is this over here, of my money do I want to put in each of these different types of investments. So equities or stocks, fixed income or things like bonds. Guaranteed is very similar, means you're getting a guaranteed return. Money markets, not the same kind of money market that Ryan's talking about. There's only one option for that. We can just sort of skip that. Multi-asset is multiple things in one product. So could be half some stocks, some bonds, etc. And then there's a real estate category also. So if we just look at the stocks options, you can see that there's the name of the stock of the stock fund is over here on the left. They sometimes can tell you what they mean, but not always that much. What you really want to look at is the next column. So this one, like the first one is saying it's mid cap value. So it's basically that middle range type of size of the companies. This one is emerging markets, which means risky. Emerging markets means they're not actually stable at the moment, but they could be really great. This next one's global, large stock, large growth. This one down here is aggressive allocation. So those things will kind of tell you what you're looking at in terms of picking one of those. So if we click one of them, it should. Why isn't it giving me? There we go. Maybe this one will. Oh shoot. Maybe because I'm logged out. But it should be. Well, I was wanted to show you guys the what those look like. Okay, I'm gonna answer a question. It can't roll over. What happens when you leave? Yeah. So if you're not going to roll it over to your new company, you can just keep it. You can just keep it. It'll exist. It'll stay there until you retire. But you can no longer it's attached to whatever your residency institution is. So you can no longer contribute to it, and you can no longer change the investments in it. So it would just something you have to just remember that it's there. And then when you turn 60, 65, whatever, you would just have to say, well, I have this other bucket of money that's been growing since residency, and you could just use it then. So you can't still make contributions to it. It would just kind of exist there. Does that make sense? Okay, great. All right, I'm gonna just try this real quick and then see if it will. Let me choose one here. Okay, so this is a mutual fund, lots and lots of numbers here. But what I think is helpful is to look down here at these style things. This is what it's looking at in terms of how big it is. So large, mid, or small, and then value, blend, and growth. So growth means there's lots of room for improvement, lots of room for growth. Value means it's a good value, probably not going to have a ton of growth, and then a blend is somewhere in between. This is kind of what your risk would look like. This is kind of an average risk investment, which is fine. And then up here, where's our this is just comparing it to other options. And this last part is telling you what exactly is in this mutual fund. So a lot of the things you'll see are going to be mutual funds. A lot of these retirement accounts won't let you invest in one specific company because it's just so risky. They will only sort of let you invest in mutual funds or index funds. So this one is saying that this is the breakdown of all the companies that are invested in this specific mutual fund. So you can learn all these things and go through all of this, or you can just invest in an index fund or a target date fund, which is, if you're just starting out, I think it probably makes a lot of sense. If you, start really getting into this stuff and really want to get into it and do more research, then you certainly can. But I think it's a good place to start. So this is also just kind of telling you how much it's made this today. So it's lost a bit today. This expense ratio is what percentage of what you're contributing they're going to take from you to pay for sort of the administration of the mutual fund. So that pay for the people who are deciding what's going in the mutual fund, pay for the computers that do the tracking, et cetera. So this number you want to be as low as possible because you want your expenses to be low that you're having to pay. And this is where you can see the performance. So how's this mutual fund done over the past year, 5 years, 10 years, and since it was started in 2013. Okay. Other questions? I'll stop sharing and we can just chat. Anybody have other thoughts, questions, concerns? Anything that needs clarifying, was helpful, wasn't helpful? Oh, great. Oh, that's lovely. Okay. All right. Well, it was really good to see you all tonight. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all. Anything, so we can totally stop if you want to.